Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk Wildlife podcast. I am your host, Courtney, and I guess Merry Christmas. I won't be speaking to you guys until after Christmas now, so I thought it would be fitting to discuss an island off Australia around 1,500 kilometres off our Western Australia coastline called Christmas Island, which is so fitting, and the island is absolutely extraordinary and something truly out of this world. So if you haven't heard of Christmas Island, I hope you learn about it and have an appreciation for it. There are some native animals that are only found on this island, like the flying fox, which, of course, we will discuss. But if you have tuned in, thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. I hope you have a very great Christmas if you celebrate. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you at least had some time off work or school and still have a great holiday. So let's jump straight into it. Thank you so much again for tuning in. This is our conversation on Christmas Island. So Christmas Island does sit around 1,500 kilometres in the Indian Ocean off our western part of Australia. Now, all of its rules and laws are controlled or created by the Australian government. So it's technically an Australian territory. The island, Christmas Island, was discovered in the 1600s. I believe it was the 1640s, 1643, 1644. And it was discovered on the day that now we call Christmas. So it's named after Christmas, which, again, really fitting for this week. Now, the island itself, besides the wildlife, it is remarkable. The island is covered in a tropical rainforest, and it has, of course, a variety of wildlife, but there are freshwater systems and streams on the island. There are springs on the island. Much of the western tip, actually, of the island is a national park. In saying that, it is inhabited. One big reason why I really wanted to create this episode and discuss Christmas Island with you guys, not just because it's Christmas week, but because there is something spectacular that happens on the island. And if you know me or you have listened to previous episodes, you would know how much I look up to and I'm inspired by David Attenborough. He is a human that's just, there are too many words to describe him and his work and dedication. And I'm sure a lot of you guys that are in, wildlife and you've studied it or you are studying it, David Attenborough has either crossed your mind or he's also your inspiration. He truly has inspired so many. And besides Charles Darwin and Steve Irwin, a lot of the knowledge that I have and that I've gained and I know, and the reason why I'm inspired with wildlife is because of David Attenborough. The knowledge I know is because of him. I actually think I have a book right there of David Attenborough. Since a little girl, I've been absolutely in awe. He is spectacular. But why I'm speaking about David Attenborough is because he had a BBC documentary on Christmas Island and what takes place on this island. His words were, "It is one of the most spectacular sightings that he has ever seen, ever witnessed, one of his favorite things to film and to encounter." And that is the Christmas Island's red crab migration. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Courtney, they're crabs. How spectacular can their migration be? Boy, do I have news for you. Our red crab migration on Christmas Island brings millions of crabs making their way from the forest to the ocean. And again, there are millions. They will take over the whole beach where it looks like there's no sand left. It looks like a red sand beach. They will take over roads. So actually on Christmas Island, a few things have been put into place to help protect our red crabs while they are making their journey to the ocean, there have been bridges built in some areas because people do inhabit the island. So there are vehicles, and we want to make sure we are protecting our red crabs on their journey. So bridges have been made specifically for these red crabs to cross over, so they aren't crossing over the road where they may be run over by vehicles. There have also been road closures put into place when they are migrating to also help protect the red crab. Now, like a whole bunch of animals that either migrate or if they are solitary, they come together. It's primarily to breed. And that is exactly what our red crab is doing in their journey to the ocean. Now, this is something that's really remarkable and something I still can't get my head around is these red crabs time their migration. So their migration starts roughly at the end of the year. So this can be from October to November, but it can prolong until January. This is because the red crabs will start to migrate at the first rainfall of the season. So if rainfall this year is later, they will migrate later. And if it arrives earlier, they will start their migration earlier. What the part is that is just, it's mind-blowing really, is the red crabs rely on the moon. Let me explain. So as we know, a lot of animals take our dung beetle. They have been known to follow constellations, which maybe 80% of humans still can't do today, and our dung beetles can. But our red crabs follow the moon. Our tiger sharks also do the same when they are making that journey for feeding. When our sea turtles hatch, tiger sharks will make a massive hundreds of kilometer journey to that same place to have turtles for dinner. But our red crabs, so the moon determines the speed and the timing of their migration. They move, and they know somehow to move before dawn on a receding high tide, but they have to move during the last quarter moon. So there are a whole bunch of different phases, like a full moon, a new moon, a last quarter. Again, it's like a mystery. How? How do they know exactly the time and date and the moon phase to make that migration? Mind-blowing. Once they have left their forest and made that journey over bridges and over roads to the ocean, this is where they will breed. Now, once they have finished mating, the male will head straight back home, back into the forest until next time. But our female red crabs will stay on the beach, living in burrows for around 3 days after that initial mating to lay their eggs. Now, our red crabs can lay a whole bunch of eggs, up to 100,000 per a red crab female, which is absolutely insane. But in saying this, like a lot of our animals, especially baby animals, they don't have a high survival rate after hatching. Our sea turtles, as soon as they hatch, there are eagles waiting, there are birds of prey waiting, there's also sharks and other animals in the ocean that are waiting, and that is the same case with our baby red crabs. They really don't make it out into the water, and if they do, they are eaten by sharks and rays and fish. So a female laying 100,000 up to 100,000 eggs is necessary because a lot of babies and larvae do not survive, and to keep their populations going, they need to have as many eggs as they can. Now, if you are a seafood lover or you love to consume crab, I would highly recommend not testing out our Christmas Island red crab for a number of reasons. Firstly, they are a protected species. They are very unique and they are very necessary for the survival and health of the island. But they also consume a toxic diet. So they eat plants and leaves that are toxic. So this will stay inside them. So I highly recommend not eating their meat. And also their meat quality is not that great as well. Our Christmas Island red crabs are also very important for the health of the rainforest in which they inhabit on the island. They contribute to the rainforest's health by collecting leaves, by fertilizing the forest with their droppings. They consume plants. So although they just seem like crabs, they are so important for the health. And if you haven't seen or you haven't visited Christmas Island and you can, or you're looking for a holiday to go to in the new year, I highly recommend Christmas Island, not just for the red crabs, but for the island itself. There's so much to see and do, and there's so many more wildlife that inhabit the island. But if you are wanting to encounter our red crabs, of course, without them migrating, they will be living in the rainforests. But you can find them on a bunch of beaches throughout this migration that takes place. There are two really great spots on Christmas Island. One is Greta Beach and the other one is Ethel Beach. But the migration itself is truly remarkable. But again, if you are relying on seeing them, it does depend on the rainfall and the tides and the moon phase as well. The island has a whole bunch of native animals, from geckos to birds, of course the crab. One really fascinating animal that I think as a family as a whole, these creatures are some of the most intelligent and remarkable, and they are our Christmas Island flying fox. Now, unfortunately, they are the last endemic mammal on the island, which means you cannot find them anywhere else in the world but Christmas Island. They are endangered. There's only around 2,000 individuals left on the island, and this is from a number of things. Firstly, we have feral cats on the island, which are a massive problem. We also have humans and human development. Although the island is, 50% national park and 50% inhabited by people, there are, of course, vehicles on the island, but there are developments taking place. I think there was a casino being built right in the middle of the island, around all these rainforests and where these animals live. And to build, you must knock down. And a whole bunch of trees were knocked down where our flying fox lives. So they have lost a whole part of their home. They rely on the fruits and the blossoms of the trees for a food source. And without this, they really struggle. And we can see that there is evidence in their numbers, in the rapid decline of our Christmas Island flying fox. They can live in large groups up to 100, but their reproduction rate and their breeding is quite slow. And we see this with a whole bunch of, especially mammals. Mammals are some of the animals that have a slower reproduction rate than, say, our rodents or our reptiles. Our flying fox gives birth once a year. So that's a massive difference compared to our red crab, which is, laying hundreds of thousands of eggs just in one night. So it's really important we take care of the forests, not just on Christmas Island, but on mainland Australia too. Australia is so bad, incredibly awful for how much deforestation takes place, and it's heartbreaking to see. I mean, just 40 minutes out of the city here, I live in Brisbane City, 40 minutes out, literally 5 years ago, it was just countryside, and now when you drive out, you might see one tree. Like, it's being destroyed for housing development. So this is also happening on Christmas Island to build, casinos and hotels for tourism. We did discuss Rottnest Island over off Western Australia, over off Perth, for our quokkas a couple episodes back, and This island is incredible because there are no vehicles allowed on the island. It is a vehicle-free zone to protect our wildlife, to protect the quokkas, which are vulnerable. They are a vulnerable species. Unfortunately, our wildlife on Christmas Island don't have this luxury. So what other ways can we help protect them? You know, if big companies are knocking down their homes, especially for our red flying fox. So you may want to check out Parks Australia. They are an organisation that helps protect and keep our flying foxes safe. They are trying to control our introduced animals on the island, like our cats, which are a massive problem in killing our flying foxes. And also we have yellow crazy ants on the island, which are also a massive threat to our flying foxes. We, of course, have, as we mentioned, human development for housing, for the casinos. So they are also helping with this not moving forward, in other words. You may want to find your own organisation, you may want to donate or visit the island to put that tourism money back into it to help support the wildlife. Of course, it can be as simple as planting a tree or a plant. Eucalyptus trees are great for our flying foxes. They benefit, so even native trees, but they really do benefit our flying fox. They give them a home, they give them a food source, which is fantastic. And since Christmas Island is an island covered by water, surrounded by water rather, we have our Christmas Island Marine Park, which protects the island's biodiversity and ecosystem in a number of ways. Firstly, they have created large offshore green zones, green areas, and this is where fishing isn't allowed, where boating isn't allowed. There also are inshore yellow zones, which are for only small-scale fishing, so no trawlers, nothing like that. This helps protect all of our ocean's wildlife. These sanctuaries, these marine sanctuaries are so important, and it doesn't just target one species. It targets every single animal that lives in the ocean, and we are giving them a chance to thrive, and humans are not interfering, which we tend to do a lot. There are around 700 different species of fish that has been documented around the island. We have some of the most spectacular and rare coral surrounding the island. So these safe zones are really important for our coral reefs as well, of course, as well as our wildlife. Christmas Island has some of the most beautiful coral reefs. So if you are visiting the island, there is so much to do in the ocean. There's coral reefs to explore. There's sea turtles and sharks and rays to encounter. Of course, there is the experience of the red crab migration. There are four-wheel drive tracks and walking tracks and a whole bunch of secluded beaches. This place is spectacular. But I am a history buff, and I absolutely love learning the history of a place or even an object. I think it's so fascinating to know how a word originated, or a place or an object. So I can't create this episode for you guys without talking about the history of Christmas Island, and it does have a history, that is for sure. Today, if you visit, it may seem like a very laid-back, relaxed holiday destination, but in the past it was quite far from that, and actually quite unsettling, but very fascinating. And on the island today, you can still see a whole lot of World War II artifacts. There is a very dark history, and many, many years later, after the discovery of the island in the 1940s, I think it was 1942 to 1945, around 800 to 900 Japanese troops invaded Christmas Island, and they imprisoned many of the remaining Europeans on the island. They also hunted and killed around 1,000 Chinese workers in the jungle. Very, very disheartening. The islanders sabotaged and, destroyed what they could on the island, and of course killing people There is today a large building on the cliffs of the island, which was to safeguard the island from any threats approaching on boats, but it is now being turned into a museum. So you can head over there and check out some old military equipment and learn more about the history of the island. It was in the late 1950s, I believe, that Australia took ownership of the island, and since then we have been trying to protect it and build it back up into a safe haven, since around 68% of it is a national park. Before 2020, there was an immigration detention centre on the island as well, which would harbour refugees where they would be kept, they would be held. It was closed in 2020, but that's also a whole bunch of history that you may want to check out when you're on the island. It's definitely a history-rich island, and since Australia is such a new country compared to the United States, England, of course we have history. We have some of the oldest rock art from our Indigenous people, one of the oldest, cultures in the world. But you really have to dig deep to find that, you have to go to the Northern Territory or, deep into the outback, which, it's hot, it's humid, it's sticky. It's wild out there in the outback. It's definitely not for the faint-hearted, but heading over to Christmas Island, head over to Western Australia, jump on a boat, head out there, and there is so much to see and so much to do and encounter. So much wildlife if you are a wildlife lover. If you are a history lover, there's that for you as well. So there really is a little bit of everything for everyone, which is just spectacular. But thank you so much if you have made it all the way to the end of this episode. Again, Merry Christmas. I truly hope you have one of the best holiday seasons. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I am going to post something on my Instagram about the new way of the podcast going into the new year. I just have to decide when to do it. So stay tuned for that. But as I mentioned in last week's episode, we are taking it worldwide. We are now going into your country to discuss your native wildlife, which I'm so excited for. I took a trip around Europe. I think it was 14 countries in our winter this year, their summer. I went for just over 2 months to encounter bears and deer and a whole bunch of wildlife. So I am very excited for that. I honestly cannot be more excited. And I really hope you guys stick around and you enjoy it too. But that is all for today. Again, Merry Christmas. Thank you so much. I will be seeing you this time next week, of course. Bye for now.